Quality, comfort, and grip at an affordable price. Whether it's our standard, pro, or elite socks, there's an option for everyone. Try a pair for yourself now at puregripsocks.com.
The Nike Phantom GX2 Elite versus the Adidas Predator 25 Elite FT. Which of these two are the best control boots of 2025? Starting with the price, where when you're talking about the two most popular options from the two brands within these lines, the Nike Phantom GX2 Elite at full retail will run you $260, whereas the Predator 25 Elite FT will run you $280. Granted, when it comes to the Predator, if you can live without the fold-over flap tongue and elastic strap, you can get the normal non-FT Elite variation for $20 less at $260, and even if laceless boots are your thing, that's also an option for the same $260. With your only alternative from Nike being the Phantom Luna 2 Elite, which is basically the exact same football boot with the addition of a mid-cut Flyknit collar. For an extra $25, you can have just that, bringing the grand total to $285 for the mid-cut variation. However, like I always tell you guys, you almost never have to pay full retail, where if you're interested in any of these boots for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail prices by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the links down below. And really quickly before we move on, if you guys enjoy these comparison videos on the channel, don't forget to drop a like on this one. Let me know which boots you'd like to see compared next down in the comment section, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on my brutally honest reviews of all the latest football boots of 2025. You would want any football boot to offer a great touch on the ball, but in the case of a control boot specifically, you expect the touch to be phenomenal. And in the case of both of these products, the main focus in regards to what makes the touch special is the additional grip that they provide. Where in the case of the Phantom, it's their grip knit material, effectively a stickier variation of Nike Flyknit, where the actual grip is incorporated within the yarn itself. So it's not an added layer on the surface. The knit itself is what has that extra grip to it. And when you run your finger along it, you'll definitely notice that it has almost like a soft silicone sensation that genuinely does feel that little bit grippy. There's also some 3D texturing across the surface of the majority of the upper, which I don't think really does all that much in terms of enhancing grip, but certainly on the ball, you get a very consistent amount of additional grip that pretty well no other football boot has on offer other than Nike's own Mercurial Vapor or Superfly 10, in that those boots also now have a grip knit material. In terms of overall grip though, you definitely get a little bit more of it from the Phantoms than you do the Mercs, and really this is the ideal option for somebody that's looking for consistent grip pretty much everywhere on the foot. Where I'm not suggesting that the extra grip is going to enhance your ability to control the ball, but it definitely can give you this sensation of better control if having extra grip is one of your preferences, because if you're not a fan of extra grip, then I definitely don't think that these are the boots for you. Where in the case of the Pred 25s, grip is still a main focus of the design, but it's far more targeted than what you'll find from the Phantoms, in that it's pretty much in one specific area of the foot rather than all over. The upper is made from a Hybrid Touch 2.0 material with a relatively smooth, I don't necessarily want to say slippery finish, but a finish that doesn't feel sticky in any way whatsoever. So everywhere that you can see here in white is just going to be a smooth upper material. It's not until you get into the striking area of the foot, as well as a little bit here on the tongue, if you go for the FT variation, that you're going to find these really thin, really fine rubber strike skin elements that have a little bit of give to them. You can see that there's some raised parts, there's some lower parts, and in this area of the foot, this little bit of rubber genuinely does quite a bit in terms of grabbing the ball and giving you that sense of control, as well as the ability to just generate spin a little bit more easily. Before the Predator was ever marketed as a control boot, they were power boots, where these striking elements were very much focused around hitting free kicks, generally being more accurate and having a more powerful shot. I don't think these are going to increase the power of your shot, and I don't even necessarily think that they're going to make your shot more accurate, but certainly the way that this rubber striking element grabs the ball, particularly when passing and shooting, is something that I am a really big fan of. And if you're somebody that in particular likes to push the ball with the outside of your foot and don't like having extra grip in that area, because you have a slick finish, or at least a smoother finish on the outside and then a grippy finish on the inside, that's really going to be one of your key differences when comparing these to the Phantoms. Do you want grip everywhere all the time, or would you prefer it if you only had grip in a targeted area that's most frequently going to be used when striking the ball? Grip aside, when it comes to feel for the ball, that's where once again you're going to find some pretty big differences between these two. Where simply put, the knitted upper of the Phantom is just significantly softer and more pliable than what you're going to find from the Predators. If you like that more sock-like sensation, a little bit more of a cushion, slightly padded feel without being overly thick, because don't get me wrong, this is not a super padded upper. If you get stepped on, there's not much in the way of protection, but certainly from a softness perspective, these feel very soft. Whereas the Hybrid Touch 2.0 synthetic of the Predator, despite being marketed as a direct replacement for natural leather, which again is typically associated with being a little bit more padded and a little bit softer in general, I don't necessarily want to say that this material isn't soft, because that's not necessarily the case, but it is very thin and doesn't have much in the way of cushion. In that regard, it trends much closer in the direction of a pair of speed boots as far as thickness is concerned than I think a lot of people would expect based on how they look, especially with that fold over tongue. But certainly from a touch perspective, they are on the barefoot thinner side of things. So if you don't like an overly thin boot, again, despite their more rugged appearance, they're not particularly padded. When it comes to traction, once again, there's a pretty big difference. However, one offers a few more options than the other. Where in the case of the Preds, they have definitely not reinvented the wheel. It's the same control frame, sole plate, and stud pattern that carries over from the Predator 24, which is definitely not a problem, but the stud pattern itself is the typical layout that we've been getting from Adidas basically since 2010. So if you've worn an Adidas boot in the last 15 years, you more or less know what to expect from these. It's very well rounded with all triangular studs scattered about, and it does provide some nice aggressive traction if that's what you're looking for, but still that little bit of freedom to twist and pivot. Is it a real standout in the crop of all the different football boot options that are out there? Not necessarily, but it certainly gets the job done. Whereas the Phantom GX2, to the dismay of many, carries over the sole plate and stud pattern originally introduced on the first Phantom Luna with its Cyclone 360 FG stud pattern. All bladed studs, very Mercurial-esque in that regard, with this circle of 5 studs in the forefoot toe box area that are supposed to prioritize rotational movements, but anybody that's actually used this stud pattern knows that it pretty much just digs in and provides plenty of bite, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it certainly goes against how Nike have marketed this. But if you do like a lightweight speed boot-esque feel, that's pretty much what this has on offer. Outside of FG stud patterns though, Nike just gives you a few more options, where obviously if you need a pair of soft ground boots, whether it's the Pred or the Phantom or any other model for that matter, as long as you have those 6 metal screw-in studs, the traction is pretty well going to be the same. As far as AG options though, which is very important these days, if you go for the AG version of the Predator, it's basically a very subtle variation of what you already have in the FG model, which I suppose would be better suited for artificial grass, but in all reality, it's hardly any different. Whereas the AG version of the GX2 actually gives you what I would argue is a true AG setup, as well as the sole plate from the original Phantom GX, which I think a lot of people much prefer over this FG1. And with that AG stud pattern, while it's great on artificial grass, you can also technically get away with using it on firm natural grass, and it's going to perform like a more traditional conical stud pattern, which isn't really that dissimilar from what you would get on a Nike Tiempo. In other words, with the Phantoms, you technically have the option of going for more aggressive blades or slightly more traditional conical studs, which is nice. When it comes to weight, I think both of these boots are lighter than a lot of people would expect, but of course the scale does not lie. Both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the Predators, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.55 ounces, the equivalent of 214 grams. Change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the Phantom GX2 Elites, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.85 ounces, the equivalent of 194 grams. Where, like I said, they're both lighter than you'd expect them to be, but it must be said that the GX2 is 20 grams lighter, which is quite significant. So the Preds do offer that lightweight feel, but the Phantom GX2 is on par with some of the most popular speed boots on the market, at least from a weight perspective. When it comes to the fit and feel on feet, there is once again a pretty big difference between these two, where it's definitely very noticeable that the knit-based upper of the Phantom GX2 is just softer and more pliable. It requires a lot less break-in time than the Preds, but that's not to say the Predator is an uncomfortable pair of football boots. It just has a thinner synthetic upper that has more overall structure to it. From an overall fit and shaping perspective, you're definitely going to find that there is more width through the heel, midfoot, and forefoot of the Phantom GX compared to the Predators, but when you get to the toe box, the Phantoms, unfortunately, at least based on what I like, have this super pointed, borderline narrow shaping to them. So if you are not a fan of a pointed toe, or you just like to have more width in that area of the boots, then the Phantom GX2, at least from a fit and comfort perspective, might not be the best choice. Whereas the Preds, while certainly not extremely wide or extremely narrow, have a pretty consistent snug fit all the way through, and then again a much more rounded toe box shape, which is way more along the lines of what I like the feel of, and certainly what fits my feet the best. From a lockdown perspective, again, there's arguably a little bit more structure on offer from the Predators versus the GX, but I think both of them do feel relatively secure on feet. And then when it comes to sizing, I'm wearing both of these boots in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So whether you're going for the Predators or the GX2s, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. Where I guess to summarize all that information, if the GX2 had the same shaping as the Predators, I think 100% they'd be the more comfortable football boot, but because of that narrower shaping to the toe box, it is going to turn a lot of people away, which is why personally I prefer the fit and feel of the Preds on feet, mainly from a comfort perspective based on the shape of my feet, which is huge because if the boots don't feel comfortable to you, nothing else really matters. So in conclusion, these are both excellent control boots, and there really isn't a bad choice between them. To put things as simply as possible as far as how you should go about choosing, if you want grip all over, the Phantom GX2 is the way to go, whereas if you'd rather just have grip in a targeted area, particularly where you hit the ball, then go for the Predator 25. Having said that, while the Predator, especially the FT version, might be the more popular boot at the moment because of the crazy nostalgia factor with that fold-over tongue, I'd make the argument that from a technical perspective, the GX2 is the more impressive product in terms of providing more grip and more consistent grip across the entire foot. It's significantly lighter than the Predator. It is comfortable if it fits your foot shape. And again, I do like the fact that you have that option of bladed or conical studs depending on which stud pattern you go for. But then there's the fit and comfort factor, where again, I think this is very much down to personal preference and the specific shape of your feet, but I am just not a fan of the super pointed and narrow shape of the toe box on the Phantom GX2. Outside of that area, this boot offers more width through the forefoot, midfoot, and heel than what you're going to find from the Predators, but overall, the shaping I just think is better on the Preds, at least for my feet, and from a comfort perspective, is the more comfortable option for me. So while I do think the GX2 is maybe that little bit more technically impressive, I would personally pick the Predator 25 Elite FT given the choice between these two, not only because I find them more comfortable, but because I really am a sucker for that old school power boot vibe that despite them being so thin, they still definitely have. Both excellent football boots, it just really depends on what you like and want.